he'd probably drunk some, contaminated water, and he developed sores on his body which were oozing blood and pus. And so he was thinking that, in this condition, if I go past the gate of the Jagannath temple, I may contact some Brahmins who are going in to worship Lord Jagannath, and they're altar clean. So better that I don't do that. And so he went on the beach path, and it gets extremely hot in Jagannath Puri. And so he actually walked on the sand, which by the time he got to see Lord Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya looked at him and said, "Which way did you come?" He said, "I came on the beach path." He says, "Well, you've blistered all your feet, just look." And Sanatana Swami just, hung his head, sort of thing. And he said, "Why did you come that way?" He said, well, and he explained to him what I've just said, that I would contaminate. And Lord Chaitanya embraced him. And he was really happy. He says, "You're the emblem of Vaishnava etiquette." Why? Because if we don't change our activities, the process is not actually really having an effect on us. If the process is working, we'll naturally start to become more conscious of, what we're actually doing, what our real position is, what the position of other Vaishnavas are. But if we don't, it means there's some blockage which is preventing us from actually going forward. Some reason. Anyway, just like, I remember when I started visiting the Manchester Temple in 1983. And then it wasn't a temple, actually, it was a Namahata. I first of all went to the university, and then they changed it to Ranchaw's house. And then he told me to go to Chaitanya College for a weekend. And he said, you'll get association of devotees there, more devotees and deities. It'll be a good experience for you. So I went. And I think it was that time, either first time or the second time I went, I stayed a weekend, and it was a Vyasa Puja. And, nobody's experienced a Vyasa Puja before, who's, and who is not conversant with devotional service. And so, it really gave me a real insight into who I was associating with. There were all these grown men, in my eyes, just a seedling devotee, or still a gross karmi. I was thinking, wow, these people are glorifying this other person so much. I thought, it's unbelievable. Nobody does that in the material world. Only if they want something, of course, that's different. If there's something to obtain, we'll glorify maybe. But I think they've nothing to gain. And this was actually one of their god brothers. It was Bhagavan at that time. And so that really affected me in a positive way. So then the point I'm making is I could immediately see the difference between interactions of a materialistic person and interactions of a devotee. And but when I first started associating with devotees, I thought, why all this protocol? Just treat people like people. But then after a while, I thought, actually, this is treating people like people. And so Chitraketu, internally, he was acting, in the proper way. I was thinking, wow, just look at Lord Shiva. He's so elevated, but, he's acting in this way, even though he's not attached. And all the sages are there. I don't fully understand it. And so the point is that he started laughing at the situation. I mean, that's not the thing to do in that situation. You know, there's Lord Brahma's there, the four Kumaras, anybody else can, you know, the 7 great sages, then everybody out to the universe is there surrounding Lord Shiva, and they don't say anything. And he's a advanced devotee, but then he starts laughing. It's just like, you don't do that sort of thing, do you? You know. And so that's what the problem. And so he didn't actually deal with it. If he'd have actually come into that assembly and said, "My dear Lord Shiva, I'm so fortunate to be in your association, in the association of all these great sages. I'm very surprised that, you know, all the sages are here and you're here, and, you know, you don't seem to be in the position of a sage at the moment," you know, something like that. Maybe that would have been a bit much, actually. And then Lord Shiva it would have given him room to explain, and he would have shown his ignorance in front of all. So that would have been acceptable. So, you know, to actually properly deal, this is a difficulty, actually. Inside, we may have some feelings, but externally, we have to still use a protocol. And Chitraketu, the worst thing is he upset Parvati. You know, even Parvati, she's the material energy personified, but still, he explains later how she has this sentiment of a woman, and a woman, when her husband is actually, you know, seemingly, insulted in that way, she won't tolerate it. And she was acting on that platform. But then later we'll realize that, you know, she wasn't acting properly either, because in front of her husband, maybe she should have been tolerant. And later on, when she actually cursed Chitraketu, you know, Chitraketu just took it like a Vaishnava, and he started offering prayers of respect to Parvati and Lord Shiva, and she was completely diffused and realized the position. And then Lord Shiva started preaching the glories of a Vaishnava. So even though we may not mean it, we should do it. That's the point. And then it becomes internalized. Of course, it's easier said than done, you know. And second part of this is that it's talking about Daksha now. The difference between Daksha and Chitraketu. So Chitraketu wasn't an out-and-out offender. He what they call in the material, he blew it. You know what I mean? He had a chance to actually advance, but, you know, he blew it. He acted wrongly. I remember one devotee with his spiritual master. His spiritual master, this devotee was accused of something, and by another devotee, and his spiritual master was there, and he started arguing back, saying, "It weren't me, well, this, that, and the other." And the spiritual master said, "You've just missed a great opportunity to become humble." You know, just to accept it and just. So yeah, Daksha was completely different. Daksha, he you know, due to materialistic, he was actually a demigod, and demigods, you know, we hear about demigods, and we tend to think, you know, when we see Indra being insulted and, you know, falling prey to materialistic thought and that, we tend to be a little bit, you know, critical if we're not careful. But, you know, you just look at Lord Indra's position. You know, he actually gets the darshan of Lord Vishnu. And in the Govardhan Leela, he gets a darshan of Krishna. And that's not easy. But yeah, you know, Krishna uses him in such a way that to teach us that if it can happen to Indra, then it can certainly happen to us. But so, you know, Daksha is one of the demigods, and he's one of the chief Prajapatis. So we can imagine what he looks like. You know, he's got a beautiful body. It's effulgent. He said when he walked into that assembly where all the sages were for the yajna, he said that he actually illuminated he says he was actually more effulgent than all the sages. He just illuminated the whole place. And so, and everybody stood up except Lord Shiva. And, you know, Daksha, he developed this superiority complex to Lord Shiva. That, you know, he was so expert in what he did. He was so pucker in doing pujas and sacrifices in order to perform his service. And Lord Shiva was there, you know, looked like a disheveled urchin as far as he was concerned. That's how he saw him. And he started speaking like that. And so this was due to envy in the heart. You know, there's 3 ways we associate with others. Is that right? Can anybody remember the 3 ways? We faithfully serve and offer respects to seniors. We make friends with equals, and we're compassionate to those who are not as, you know, fortunate as ourselves, who are still making, you know, making some progress. Is that right? And so, which is the easiest? I mean, everybody will find it different, but it's where I think where I used to think. I found that it's not always the case. I always thought that it's easy if somebody is not as good as you, you know, or you know, you're thinking like that, then it's easy to bestow your mercy on them, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, especially when we first come to devotional service, to actually offer respects to seniors, it's quite easy. To make friends, it's quite easy, comparatively speaking, but it seems a lot easier to be able to, you know, bestow mercy on juniors. But here, you know, Daksha, he was thinking Lord Shiva was a junior, but he envied him. And so with a materialistic conception, a materialist looks down on those who are actually not as fortunate as himself. Is that right? Would you say that's right? Yeah, I mean, myself, fellow. I remember watching Christmas Carol and what do they call him now? The old guy who used to take it, Alice the Sim. Alice the Sim, he was the best. You know, there was a little bit of comedy in the way he acted. He made it really, and when he'd been, you know, purified by the ghost of Christmas future, he woke up that morning. He was full of, you know, happiness that now I can actually do. And he went out the window and he saw one young boy running by. I say, young fellow. He says, is that Christmas turkey still in the window of the butcher shop? He said, yes, it is, sir. He said, go and fetch it, and I'll give you half a crown if you come back quickly with it, you know. So, you know, it was still like that. And they say Winston Churchill, I heard this tale, he was at Dover, and there, you know, they had like a place where all the it was like some balconies. And he came onto the top balcony, he looked down, he saw some soldiers who had been wounded. And they, you know, they were in the sun so that the wounds would heal quickly. And he said, get this riffraff out of the way. You know, and he's the you know, wartime prime minister, and these are actually people who are doing all the dirty work. Just by the way that, you know, the wars go nowadays, the the leaders, they send everybody else to war instead of going in themselves. Anyway, I've noticed that quite a lot actually in materialistic thought, that they don't actually try to help a lot of people. And somebody who does try to help somebody who's not as fortunate themselves, they call them a toff. He's a toff. The people who this is a real toff. He actually he doesn't treat me like most, you know. Okay. So Daksha, he was thinking like that, and the result was that, you know, that he just caused so much difficulty for in that situation. Because what happened is Brigu, he was the spiritual master of the Brahmins, and Daksha was the Brahmin. And then on the other side there was Shiva, and his followers was Nandishwar. Nandishwar was the leader of all the ghouls and hobgoblins who were following Lord Shiva. And so when, you know, when Daksha started cursing Lord Shiva, Nandishwar, he couldn't tolerate it, and he started cursing all the Brahmins. And then, you know, after he'd finished cursing, then, you know, Brigu, you know, the chief of the Brahmins, he started, you know, blaspheming, criticizing and cursing Nandishwar and his followers. And then there was a big fight. So, you know, it's like the individual. If the individual takes care of his own spiritual life, then, and everybody does that, then everything works out. That's all we can do, really, because we can't actually control anybody else. We can only control ourselves. And, you know, if somebody actually does that, it has, like Prabhupada, it has a big effect on everybody around him. That's why he was so successful. It's all in that internal development. And if we internally develop nicely, then we're able to deal with every situation in an appropriate way. And we just have to be careful that at least we won't act on the platform of Daksha, but we have to be careful, like Chitraketu, to, you know, not become proud of our advancement. Because that's like that's one of the final things, is that we become proud of being a devotee, no, proud of our situation. The more, still, there's some remnants of the mode of goodness. It hasn't become pure goodness. And so, you know, Krishna will help us to get over that. But it's better if we do it ourselves. Otherwise, you know, sometimes it's painful. Like Sudama Vipra, he was like so humble, such a Pukka Brahman, such a Pukka Vaishnava. But then, you know, by Krishna's arrangement, he arranged for him to actually become very wealthy. And he didn't want it, because he realized that when we get material acquisitions, there's a tendency to actually try to enjoy them and a tendency to become proud. And he realized that. But Krishna saw that actually he's proud of his austerity. So he actually put him in a position where he actually, you know, he couldn't be proud of that. But he could be proud of being, you know, so it's best, you know, that we realize ourselves, or in the association of the devotees, and we do something about it. Because Krishna isn't a sentimentalist. You know, he's like softer than a rose but harder than a thunderbolt. If he actually if he likes his devotee, they say, I've not read this, but say if he likes his devotee, he'll give him everything. But if he loves his devotee, he'll take everything away. Is that Yashaham Anugrinami Harishe Dadtanam Shanai Tato Gyanam Tadantisha Svajana Dukadukitam. Krishna says, when I especially favor somebody, I gradually take away all his wealth. And then, that person suffers and he becomes more surrendered to Krishna. So this is, but then our process is, Prabhupada thought like that actually. He thought, Krishna's taken everything away from me. I had a business, I had a family, I had this, that, now I've got nothing. And he was thinking like that Krishna's bestowed his mercy upon me. But then, a higher principle is that, Krishna gives us everything and we just use it correctly, that's all. And then he doesn't have to take it away. That's called Yukta Vairagya. We learn how to see that whatever we've got is Krishna's mercy. And we just try to see how to use it properly in Krishna's service. Anyway, we've got 10 minutes left. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, perhaps any pastimes of Lord Ramachandra which demonstrate any pastimes of Lord Ramachandra which demonstrate this Vaishnava etiquette?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, integrity, Vaishnava etiquette means we develop integrity. First of all, we purify ourselves. And when the heart's purified, then what's integrity? What are inspiration? Inspiration comes from within, right? Inspiration. Say in spiritus, it means in Latin, or to see what's within, and what's within is the super soul. So when we're purified, we're actually we naturally connected to Krishna, and so then integrity means that we do what we know is the correct thing to do. I'll come to your question. It's coming to that, don't worry. And so, in the material, when we're actually contaminated, our integrity is not complete. Somebody's integrity on the material platform, it's not actually real integrity. Real integrity means that a devotee, we're Krishna conscious and we do what Krishna wants. And so, Lord Ramachandra had integrity. He was this prince. And his father, he saw that his father was actually really disturbed, and he asked him what it were. And his father wouldn't tell him, but then he found out of someone else what had happened. That he'd actually made a promise to his second wife, Keikayi, that he gave her 2 boons because she saved his life in a battle. She drove him off the field of battle. She was driving a chariot. And he promised her 2 boons, but she didn't take them straight away. She said, I don't need any boons. He said, well, you can take them later. And so she'd become contaminated by Mantra. Mantra wanted to banish Lord Ramachandra to the forest so that her son would become king, because then she would be the maidservant to the king. She wanted to keep her position, because she was maidservant to the favourite queen. And when Lord Ramachandra took the throne, she wouldn't be in that prestigious position. And so, she kept, on at Kaikera and eventually changed her perception of Lord Ramachandra. She saw him in the beginning as her own son. She loved him as much as Kaushalya loved him. But then, due to, that association, she became contaminated, and it completely changed her mind. And she asked for that boon of, she asked Dashrath for the 2 boons he'd promised earlier. He said, yeah, what do you want? He said, I want you to, I want that Lord Ramachandra shouldn't take the throne and my son Bharat should be put on the throne. And, you can imagine Dashrath, he was completely devastated. And then he says, second boon is that, you banish Lord Ramachandra to the forest for 14 years. And so that's what happened. And, Lord Ramachandra, he knew before Dashrath had told him, and he just made his mind, I'll go to the forest. Just to keep the prestige of my father, he made a promise. So it's proper etiquette that I should maintain his prestige as a king. Because it's a big thing for a king to keep his promise, isn't it? In Vedic society, one of the things of a Kshatriya, that when he says something, he has to do it. So this is, because a Kshatriya is like the leader of everybody else. And if he doesn't actually set the example for everybody else follows suit. So Ramachandra knew that. So he didn't want to defame his father and, put a slur on the whole dynasty. And later on in life, later on in the pastime, towards the end, the part that nobody likes, did I mention this the other day? No, I think it weren't in class. What happened is that he wanted to understand how his subjects were seeing him. Because he's a leader, he wanted to know, how am I leading? How are they seeing me? And so he decided to go out into the incognito, of course, disguise, and just mingle in the city and see if there's any feedback about him. And then he went to one low-class person. He was going past one low-class person's house, and he overheard him speaking to another person. He said, "Oh, I'm not going to accept my wife back. She's been out all night." He said, "I'm not like Lord Ramachandra, who accepts his wife back after being in the association of another man." And immediately, Lord Ramachandra, he decided that I have to actually do something. And so, even though it was proven that Sita was pure because she had to go through the fire, he saw that actually society is still not convinced. So he actually abandoned her. This is integrity. Which is akin to Vaishnava etiquette. First Vaishnava etiquette. By Vaishnava etiquette, we become purified, and then we develop real integrity. At the moment, we have some integrity, but the integrity is not necessarily pure integrity. It's according to our conditioning. And we may have certain integrity, but it may not be what others' integrity is. And therefore, there's some friction. We may think that I'm doing the things according to my integrity, but it may not be, it may not be correct, and it may not be correct from another point of view as well. We have to become purified. Therefore, we always need the association of devotees, and then we're able to balance and balances and checks. maybe positive, maybe negative feedback. But they're both good. Positive feedback, oh, I'm on the right path. Negative feedback, oh, maybe there's some changes. And the king, even the Maha Bhagavat, that means he was on the highest platform of both. He was a fearless Kshatriya, empowered with so much physical strength, but he was also a sage, a sadhu, like Maharaj Parikshit, Maharaj Yudhisthira, King Prithu. But they didn't make independent decisions. They always checked with the Brahmins, or the Vaishnava Brahmins. In this way, they're keeping themselves in check. Of course, King Prithu, he was so powerful that he didn't need that. He was actually called a Shakti-Avesh avatar. That means he was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he was considered non-different from the Supreme Lord. And, he was so powerful that he could have done everything himself. He even actually took the place of the sun. He thought, I think it was, the sun. The sun goes round Mount Meru. And when he goes round the other side, it's actually what we call gone over the horizon, according to our vision. And he thought, I'm not satisfied with this. It's better if there's light all the time. So he became a second sun and went round behind the other sun, keeping it daytime all the time. I don't know how he did it, but he did that. So he didn't need, the point is he didn't need to take advice from anybody else, but he did. Okay. Control Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.